right knee and my neck have been things that I've had to work around for decades. I've utilized a lot of different techniques where I don't have to make those contact points. I don't fight for head position. I don't gnaw my way in to winning head position ever. I'll give up head position every time to find easier outlets and more efficient modalities for takedowns. So it kind of spits in the face of wrestling meta, where I concede position a lot because I feel like people give that up a lot easier. So I've had to formulate takedowns that derive from them being overconfident. I have to tell myself every time I get on the mat that I'm not gonna be a training partner for someone, or I'm not gonna go in a half sparring or live sparring way, but that kind of like dog in me always wants to compete or just be there for an athlete that needs to compete soon. So it's really been like an internal struggle I've had to deal with. But the moves I've chosen are much more efficient now.
Welcome back to the BJJ Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ford. My guest today is a black belt in judo. He's also a first-degree black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's a Team USA Olympic coach and also a USA Judo World Team coach. He was an NCAA D1 wrestler at the University of Nebraska. He's also an All-American wrestler. He was also a California State Wrestling champion in high school, and he's a highly decorated judoka. Some of his judo achievements include a 3-time USA national champion, a 2-time winner of the Best Technique Award, 2-time US Open champion, a Puerto Rican champion, an Ontario International champion. He's done a lot in judo is what I'm trying to say here. He's the head coach of a former UFC bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey for many years, and he's coached 3 successful UFC championship fights. He's also the grappling coach of UFC star Paddy Pimblett. He's currently teaching out of Legion American Jiu-Jitsu in San Diego, California. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be joined today for the 3rd time on the show by Coach Justin Flores. How are you today, Justin?
I'm great, Ryan. Thanks for having me back. I'm humbled and honored, and just want to be able to kind of discuss some of the things I'm doing and just get into the nitty gritty.
That's great. Justin, it's always seriously an honor to have you here, man. Your content that you put out is, I think, some of the best on the internet when it comes to takedowns, whether it's for jiu-jitsu or just for pure judo and wrestling. So I look forward to picking your brain for the 3rd time. I appreciate you doing this again. So Justin, catch us up. It's been a couple years since you've been on the show. What have you been up to in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I've been pretty busy in the space of grappling in all disciplines. I have really gotten most of my time on the mat in with gym owners and coaches, as far as like spending my knowledge and time devoted to kind of trying to up the level of game of takedowns within the sphere of MMA and jiu-jitsu, where I think creating well-rounded grapplers is kind of what my mission statement in my 40s here. So teaching basics and intermediate as well as high level kind of concepts to high level jiu-jitsu practitioners, instructors, as well as MMA coaches. So I still do work with judoka, and I love the sport of judo, and that's where I came from, as well as wrestling. But I feel like my best work is to try and well-round the sport of jiu-jitsu. And I'm not saying there's a huge deficiency there, because there's plenty of athletes in that space that carry the torch of takedowns, but being able to seamlessly integrate concepts that derive from wrestling and judo into no-gi as well as gi jiu-jitsu is kind of where I see my future.
That's outstanding. Well, Justin, I think it's really cool that that's your main focus. And I do think that there has been a big deficiency in history in jiu-jitsu. When you compare the takedown game between some of the top guys and then compare that to some Olympic level judoka or D1 wrestlers, there's definitely a big difference. And the cool thing about that is that the jiu-jitsu community has really taken notice of that in the last 5 to 10 years, especially. You see a lot of guys cross-training, wanting to learn judo, going into wrestling rooms and addressing that deficit that used to exist. And I agree with you. I think now that the takedown game and the standing game that we see in competitive grappling has grown tremendously as a result. I'd actually love to pick your brain on this. I'd like to talk to you about developing good habits on the feet. What do you feel are some really important general rules when it comes to posture and positioning when starting grappling from the feet?
Sure. I guess that depends on your physical attributes and maybe some of your limitations as a grappler. If we're speaking about jujitsu, I think it's important to note having an understanding of who you are as a grappler. Like if you're right-handed or left-handed, if you're an older gentleman or if you're younger and athletic, and speed and explosivity are so like modalities you incorporate. I think being able to have these concepts that derive from a system rather than being maybe a move collector where you have like 10 throws or takedowns that you like to use. More or less, I like to have an approach and a system of getting your hands on someone and getting the right grips and being able to almost have like a battle of attrition where you could create off balances or make your opponent make mistakes and then capitalize rather than forcefully trying to do moves that might not be open, which lead to injuries as well as having them stuffed and countered. So I like to have like some basic core components that lead to growth within the space and confidence and a place where you could really start from rather than, well, I got 7 moves. How do I incorporate those for successful outcomes, no matter the discipline? So I like to kind of utilize what paradigms I understand really well and where those circles of understanding overlap, like judo, wrestling, and jujitsu. If you take like a Venn diagram and overlap them, that meeting spot in the middle is where I derive a lot of my curriculum and techniques that I teach, as well as just formulas that lead to successful outcomes, takedowns, back takes, pinning combinations, and submissions. So having a background in judo, I learned arm bars and chokes really well, pinning in wrestling, and back takes in wrestling. So using those formulas for successful outcomes in jiu-jitsu takes a little bit of skewing, but take into account the knowledge I've gained over the last 10 years from jiu-jitsu, kind of leaving some on the cutting room floor as far as judo and wrestling. So understanding your core competency and moving forward in a space where you're confident and you have an answer to a lot of problems that are set forth when you do start on your feet, which mainly is injuries. So falling weight is a huge barrier between, learning takedowns and being safe in your approach to them. So I really do kind of attack that, and movements and moves that I leave on the cutting room floor that lead to injuries or outcomes that can be prevented of being countered. I kind of like have a blueprint that I've gone by. And I feel like once you understand that blueprint and mechanics that lead to those positive outcomes, you're going to be much better off. And you can kind of break those rules once you know those things and utilize the skills that you've learned in the past, like moves. So a lot of times, you see viral videos of me doing cool moves and I appear to be really fast. It's not really that. I'm 45 and I've had 20 knee surgeries and I have an ailing body, but I'm in good enough position to react in time ahead of my opponent to have the successful outcome. So it's just keeping good position and understanding what that is. And that starting point gives a lot of people confidence to start on their feet rather than there's so many variables. I don't know. I'm overstimulated. I'm just going to sit down because that's where I'm safest. So it gives you a little bit of a place to start. And I just show you the door. And from there on, you have an outlet to be creative and have positive outcomes on your feet.
Justin, there's something you said there I find really interesting. You said that you're 45 and you don't feel like you're necessarily a fast player. It's more about timing. That age-old thing, timing beats speed, right?
Yes.
One way that grapplers who are savvy on their feet can usually exploit their opponents is through pattern recognition, like being able to identify rhythm stepping and bad habits and identify the proper timing like you're describing. How does someone develop that skill? How do you develop the skill of learning how to time something based off of recognizing patterns and things like that?
Sure. I think it's kind of having an ideology, a system of approach, and how you encounter problems and how you solve them. I like to think of it really simply. If I'm a right-handed athlete, I've thrown a ball my whole life. I've kicked the ball with my right foot my whole life. I'm a righty. I want to lead with my right foot and lead with my best side, rather than where if you're a striker, it's the opposite. So a lot of jujitsu athletes, I'd usually do a straw poll at the beginning of my seminars where I'll have, 100 athletes or 100 jujitsu practitioners there. And I ask them to raise their hand if they're right-handed, and 95% of them raise their hand. And then I say, which leg do you lead with when you approach takedowns or guard passing? And many of them lead with their left foot. So right off the bat, I don't want to give people an identity crisis in their, later years or in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. But a lot of times therein lies the problem and the solution. It's not like me who's just telling them this is my way. This is the paradigm and understanding of where takedowns come from, best offensively and best defensively, just based on your lead leg. So if you're right-handed, lead with your right foot. If you're left-handed, lead with your left foot. So starting from that kind of structure, a lot of off balances and rhythm and pattern can be associated with just that alone, like circling in the opposite direction of your lead leg, understanding the 3 layers of distance you have from your opponent, whether you're just close enough to touch them, or you're hand fighting and jockeying for grips in a little closer proximity, or your horns are locked where you have tie-ups or certain grips depending on gi and no gi, where you operate and how you could get movement and pulls and pushes and circling to get steps taken, where you could start associating attacks based on patterns and off balances. So once I structure it that way, it becomes a little bit more palatable for students to kind of understand their best self. And from there on, you could learn moves. So I don't like to just teach moves. I like to teach an understanding of where positive outcomes come from. And usually it's that. So if you're a right-handed person, here's the way I want you to approach your opponent. Here's the direction where you could angle off and have them miss opportunities and make them maybe do something that they feel forced to do, and you could take advantage of it, whether it's a guard pull or a shot. You have the best outlet for an angle to then create an attack or have an off balance, or then kind of pick up the pieces and have a takedown or a back take, or get them underneath you in a way where you can lead to submissions or takedowns.
It's funny how you talk about something as simple as recognizing whether someone's left-handed or right-handed before moving forward and developing the blueprint of their game. It's something I feel like doesn't get talked about enough in grappling. And it's funny because, like, obviously a lot of people who are right-handed, they might assume that, hey, my fighting stance will be right hand back. So that's probably the same for grappling. For the people that don't understand why on a technical level, why do you want your dominant hand front? Does it just make penetration steps easier? Like what are some reasons for that?
Well, I think you've probably built a lifetime of skills without knowing it on your right side if you're a righty, or I'm a lefty, so everything's leading with my left side. But your best attributes, skills, proprioception, coordination, attacking with the side you've built those skills on is going to lead you to be somewhere quicker and less fumbly and have more coordination and skills just without even really realizing it. So kind of knowing yourself and self-awareness is like probably having that IQ and having the timing and coordination built in already is going to lead you to having to do less reps to get to from A to B quicker than starting fresh with your left side being your dominant side, even though your left leg is the leg you lead with, even though you're right-handed. So I think a lot of people come to me and they're like, well, I'm ambidextrous and, I do this left-handed and this right-handed. But I feel like at a base level, picking a side, starting there, building skill, understanding how to get somewhere because your foundation and mechanically built and structured in a way where you're confident in your stance, with your weight either on your front foot or your back foot, moving forward and backwards, circling away from your lead leg in a way where you're downloading information about your partner, your opponent, which you can utilize against them later in later exchanges, or in that exchange where if you're starting from scratch and you're just trying to put moves out there, it's kind of like spamming things that the timing will be off, the feeling will be off, or it's not even built a feeling of an opening. And in judo, that happens a lot where you build kazushi for off balancing. You have good full body movement, tai sabaki, where you understand yourself using both hands and feet simultaneously while moving your opponent, probing, utilizing your feet more, regripping, all those things that kind of get layered on top of each other. And those are skills that take a long time to learn. And I'm not telling, jujitsu practitioners to go down rabbit holes and to try and build all that at one time. I'm saying start slow. Understand yourself with your right leg in front of your left. Know your lowered stance when you're further away. And once you get to a tie-up where you feel comfortable and you're framing them, or you have something underneath like an underhook or a 2-on-1, you could kind of come up out of your stance in a way that leaves you on the balls of your feet rather than flat-footed, or your weight distribution bent over in a posture where your head might be lower than theirs, where the successful outcomes are hard unless you're just always shooting in and level changing underneath someone, which I understand if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 through maybe 25. But that's where, you want to be able to understand yourself as you age in the sport and keep doing what you're doing forever. And longevity is a key to that. And choosing attacks that work for, the upper ages you're going to reach when you want to still continue the sport of jiu-jitsu. So kind of leaving a lot of high impact moves on the cutting room floor as you age. It helps to have the whole kind of circumference of techniques understood, but then really narrow into what you're not maybe turning your back, or you're not level changing underneath, or you're not taking big risks, or you're already in position to attack based on a good foundation. So I think it's paramount to know yourself, know how to kind of adjust based on different looks you're getting while remaining safe in a tie-up or stance that isn't a hard task to get to. So I like to kind of choose and utilize takedowns that come from tie-ups, which come from outside positions that are easier to acquire, where maybe they're attacking and you're countering to get a good tie-up, or maybe you're starting at wrist control and pulling them off balance while you're moving to adjust to a tie-up you're in more control of, and then being able to kind of plug in moves that you've learned that associate with positions that you're in more often based on the safety network of kind of skills you've built, instead of like, I got this random flying armbar, I got this random double leg, I've got this big Osoto Bari, these moves that are disjointed, that are hard to connect together, where I like to think of all my moves can be connected together in a pattern where I could spam a foot sweep to get to another trip, or then I could use a shot to finish a half a foot sweep. And I'm almost like chaining things together where it's more efficient rather than a big blast through someone, where I think the paradigm of folk style wrestling in America, just American wrestling in general, based on, Dan Gable's Big Ten Iowa style, which proliferated most of the paradigm of wrestling in America, is go through them, squeeze harder, break them, is a lot harder to do as you age. But in your 20s and, maybe early 30s at the latest, you could force that style upon people. But in jiu-jitsu, a lot of times that puts you in trouble, where your neck is, you're able to get guillotined, or you're in a position where you're in on the legs getting kimura'd, or these counters that jiu-jitsu moves are successful against hard wrestling. So I say, like, sometimes take your foot off the throttle. Understand that pulls rather than pushes lead to more off balances. Circling, keeping them moving rather than them fortified, structured, and you're trying to attack someone without an angle. So it's a lot less complicated when you kind of start to understand the basics of this system, where, you have moves after movements, these movements that create off balances, understanding who you are in a stance, your movement that creates those off balances, which lead to efficient takedowns, is where I've kind of really explored. And then to take it a step further, how those takedowns generate submissions or pins where you're in control of somebody, rather than it's a fleeting, quick control that you lose grasp of based on that you don't have a next step. So I think it is a little bit of a cheat code sometimes, rather than taking someone down into full guard and then having to break their guard and then get into half guard and then pass half guard and then look for these slow kind of chained together jujitsu meta, where you could kind of like deer in headlights someone with a quick foot sweep or an off balance that lead to chokes, or lead to arm bars, or lead to triangles, that you can kind of utilize the skills you've learned already in jiu-jitsu, utilizing this kind of system I'm trying to create that derives from wrestling and judo for those successful outcomes. So you can kind of have a little bit of a cheat code to set up your jiu-jitsu rather than, okay, we're assuming you're playing guard and I'm standing. It's a daunting task to look to pass to get to half guard, to get your leg out. From half guard, you're looking to mount. From mount, you're looking to implore your submission game. So I think a lot of times high level athletes come to me to find that cheat code and they're successful. Now my task is to teach that to all levels. How do you start? How do you middle? How do you finish? How do you work it all together? So it's been a fun exploration of just due diligence, study, a lifetime of knowledge based on my experience coaching athletes at all levels, from Olympic judoka to high level MMA fighters, high level no gi and gi jiu-jitsu competitors, and middle school, high school, and college wrestlers. So I love the exploration of grappling in all combat sports and how that I can uniquely create a system that works for everyone.
Justin, something that gets talked about a lot across all forms of martial arts is the importance of footwork. Talk to me about that a little bit when it comes to grappling. What are some big mistakes you see people make with footwork as they're in the fundamental stages of building their game? And what are some really good habits that someone new to building a takedown game should really pay attention to when it comes to footwork specifically?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two schools of thought based on wrestling versus judo, where wrestling, you could be front foot heavy or lowered stance, head a little bit lower, back bent. That position leads to kind of heavier feet, most likely. Whereas in judo, your weight can be distributed a little different, where your back leg takes most of the weight distribution, maybe 60-40. And you could use your lead leg to attack with a myriad of techniques from one foot. Whereas in wrestling, you're penetrating and lowering your level, front foot a little heavier than your back foot possibly, to shoot and penetrate underneath, where you're using your arms to encapsulate their legs with shots, high C's, double legs, single leg sweeps, single legs, duck unders, all these things where you have to go underneath them. Where a lot of times, if a combination of both you're using is a good thing for jiu-jitsu, where you're able to hand fight from the outside. And once you make your connections, you could come up into your stance and be a little bit front leg lighter, back leg heavier, and you could use your hips and your feet rather than your arms to lower and shoot. You could use your leg, your front leg, to be able to do different techniques. Ochigaris or inside trips, uchimatas or inner thigh throws, whizzer kicks, foot sweeps or ashi, deashi barai, sisai surikomiashi, nidan kosotogari, all these different moves off of one foot. So balance on your back leg is more important than balance on your front foot. So I feel like a good mixture of both need to be trained. So it's like no stone goes unturned in that area of things. So development, where you got to kind of be able to sprawl and down block. And that derives more from wrestling, to be able to counter someone. Whereas in judo, if they get in on your lead leg, you have to be balanced on your back foot and be able to counter using more judo-esque techniques. So understanding your weight distribution laterally to be able to create them to maybe have a little bit worse off of a shot or a guard pull, to then having your weight distributed on your back foot to counter. So kind of knowing the rhythm of your front foot and back foot and lateral movement, all those put together. And I feel like, I was lucky and I had a strange upbringing when it comes to sport. I started in gymnastics first. So I have like good flexibility and coordination and balance. And then for 3 years, I think I spoke about this last time I was on the pod with you. I was on a jump roping team, the San Diego Sand Skippers, where, I was jump roping a few hours a day for 3 years, understanding the rhythm and cadence and balance of having my weight distributed on the balls of my feet, leading with my left foot. So not squared, but pitter pattering with right leg, left leg cadence on the balls of my feet, kind of understanding that I'm not resting on both feet flat footed in a way where attacks can hit me and I'm not ready and prepared to react. It leaves me with those kind of like balance, weight distribution that I can adjust and adapt based on my opponent, whether it's offensively or defensively. So I think jump roping played a huge role in my development as a grappler on my feet. So not only the cardio side of things, but also just being able to be relaxed for long periods of time on my feet rather than tense and stiff and rigid and tiring based on being kind of blowing my wad, for a lack of a better term, on my feet, where a lot of people get really rigid and tired because they're willing to die on every hill. Where me, I just adjust and adapt on my feet, and I'm confident there. So I think that's just an asset, an attribute I started with early that I lean on a lot.
I can definitely see the benefit of using jump rope avidly. In fact, I do boxing once a week, and my coach is always on me, having me doing jump ropes. I hate jump rope, but I understand the benefit. I get it. It's about, timing. It's about staying mentally sharp and finding the rhythm when you're tired, not letting it hit your feet, not tripping over yourself. And then of course the cardio. So, but it's really interesting to hear you say that how much that helped you. And I can picture it when you talk about that. Speaking of cardio, something, Justin, I think a lot of people run into when they start training, say wrestling or judo, or just learning how to grapple on the feet, they think their cardio is good until they do a few rounds of standing and grappling. Then all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my God, this is different. For a lot of people that are jiu-jitsu based, when you get tired in those situations, the natural inclination is usually going to be to sit to the ground and pull guard. Cause it's like, man, I'm getting tired here. I'm exhausted. This guy's still coming forward. Let me just sit down and, implement my jiu-jitsu. I think that if you're going to build a takedown game, though, you have to try not to do that, obviously. So what advice would you give to someone to stay in the fight on the feet when they're tired, when you're later in the rounds or later in a tournament? What are some positions or some concepts that you think are important to keep yourself in the fight, not having to sit guard while dealing with someone while you're tired?
Yeah, there's a couple answers to that. I think some of it is formatted in your stance, less weight on your heels. I think a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners, and of course I'm generalizing, but I've trained with a lot of high-level jiu-jitsu athletes, and the propensity of being heavy on your heels to be able to sit at any moment you feel maybe out of control or tired first before they engage, you could sit before they attack, is something that might be good for sport jiu-jitsu, but to be well-rounded, the rush to sit first sometimes leaves you with a false sense of security in the takedown realm. So I like to have high-level athletes in the sport of jiu-jitsu that I train go rounds of sparring on their feet, never falling first, never hitting their knee first, never hitting their butt first, not sacrificing position for the hopes of a desperate action where they might end up on top. I want them to really overtrain the fact that even if they lose in practice, they're developing habits that could lead to growth later. Like those quick kind of, tricks that'll have them develop some skills that are just like work for them tomorrow are different. This is more long-term growth where, hey, be the second one to fall even if you lose. If you're scrambling, try not to, get to a comfortable place on your back or your butt first. Have your skill set be more balanced and have your weight be able to fall second. That means your balance is more of something you're working on. You're learning how to kind of rotate out of techniques or roll through back on top, possibly in a scramble. It's just being able to develop the confidence that you don't have to fall first to win the exchange. And I think that takes some time. And for some athletes, it's not for them. It's too big of a learning curve, especially how many years they've put into jumping shin to shin, doing these techniques that leave them in a position of comfort where their skill set has resided for a decade. So the growth and development sometimes is more long-term, where in the long run, a lot of times they've come back around and circled back to me and been super thankful that they can, have the high ground rather than go underneath someone first. And I think that's just one area of development that helps with that question as an answer. So that's a longer learning curve. So I think a lot of time being able to understand your best attributes, which I talked about, leaves you more confident on your feet and less nervous, rigid, tired, to where you're exhausted by the time you've done 2 minutes on your feet. And that leaves you to be like, you know what, I'm going to sit. So, which isn't the worst thing. And I get it, as I age, I'm looking to kind of go shin to shin or agi, tomoe, sumi, these techniques underneath someone that lead to positive outcomes by wrestling up or having a sub ready. I get that. And feel like that's a big part of being well-rounded, but I feel like you need to fill in some holes sometimes. So losing in an exchange is part of learning. It's not to have that big ego. And a lot of times that leaves you getting more tired because you're scared of losing an exchange rather than growing. And I've worked with a ton of athletes at the highest level in all grappling disciplines. And that's where a lot of the growth happens, by trying to, get into a position where you might be in a bad tie up. You might be losing. They have double underhooks, in underhook. And that's where some of this eco stuff comes into play, where give up position and be able to counter based on the fact that you're comfortable out of position, rather than I'm dominating every square inch of this fight, which is tiring because you're always having to be active in a strength-based way, rather than I'll have an overhook, or I'll let them have double underhooks, or sometimes I'll let them in on my legs and set traps. Where if you're more comfortable on one foot, letting them single leg you, there's plenty of movements and moves that lead to positive outcomes. Or if they're in close on your body with the body lock and you're standing, how do you turn that into a counter or a positive outcome of yourself, where, in that war of attrition where you fall second and on top for a positive outcome, and a transition where you could learn a sub within that space, or a pinning combo in that space where it leaves you mounting an opponent, or in side control, or in a north-south position, and all these positions where you're better off because you were second almost, rather than it's a race to who's first and who's first is right, or who's loudest is right in the argument. Sometimes it's the opposite. And that just takes time and dedication to the craft of like filling in holes. And I think from my perspective, a lot of times in training, if you don't have a tournament tomorrow or next week, or even in 2 months with 8-week camp, you're like learning the whole game. That's an important part and a role to play. Giving up position in like a positional battle of a short duration live go, and being okay with losing the position and doing it again and doing it again. Letting someone in on a front headlock so you could drag out, letting them in double unders so you could counter with, good hips and being balanced on one foot, vining in, or letting them in on a rear body lock to counter. All these positions that are thought of as like you're losing, which in the hierarchy of positions in all grappling forms, you probably are, but it allows you to be a little bit more open-minded and just not as concerned about the outcome, trying to be able to keep going in the chain where the scramble keeps going, rather than like, oh, I lost, I'm on bottom, let's function from here, where it like the scramble or the exchange is never really over. And I think that's a huge part of it. And that's where, the eco debate comes into play a little bit. And I've done that my whole life with judo and wrestling, where you learn patterns through drilling statically where there's no resistance. And then you develop how to do that in a dynamic way with some resistance. And then you go into positional battle. And once you're good at all those phases in competition or in live sparring, you're going to be able to have the best outcomes from your training. So I think you do have to do all phases of things rather than just narrow into one of those only. And that's how you train. And that's my Bible. So a little bit of everything, just like how I've taken the kind of approach in all of my combat sports life, where I am now, where I take a little bit of each thing and I formulate it in my own way, where I don't really have paradigm paralysis, where I'm not like, this is my Bible of judo or wrestling or jujitsu. It's where they overlap. So I think it's important to kind of open your mind enough and free yourself of whatever burdens of dogma that are within each space, to kind of be able to implore different techniques from these disciplines that lead to success.
Justin, let me ask you this. Speaking of learning curves, do you think there's a common hurdle that exists with a lot of athletes that you work with about giving into a sense of urgency on the feet? The reason I ask is that in my own game, something I've had to really consciously work on is that when I'm hand fighting on my feet and I'm not able to get in, I'm not able to land an arm drag or quite time the single leg or whatever I'm trying to set up. Sometimes there's a building sense of urgency, like, man, I got to get this to the ground. I got to hurry up. I don't want to be stalling. And it'll either make me make a crappy shot, or it'll make me just sit to guard and say, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to be able to take this guy down. Let me just sit down and start playing jiu-jitsu here before the round's over. Is that a common, is overcoming a sense of urgency a problem you run into a lot?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the internal battle I have all the time. As I've aged, that's dissipated a little bit in all forms, whether I'm in a deficient position on my back or whatever, is being able to be calm enough to weather a storm and understand that I'll have my opportunity and being patient. So a lot of times in like, say, for example, hand fighting, instead of countering every move they do, being able to reset and clear, being able to pass an elbow, to snap out of a bad position, like the current jujitsu meta is just a hard collar tie, to be able to clear that rather than maybe counter with an underhook or be able to win with a slide by doing moves. So being able to elbow pass or being able to snap and clear, being able to roll your head, being able to roll your shoulder, being able to like circle out so you have a reset. And then people get frustrated when they can't hold you in place. And that leads to them having a sense of urgency. So it's a war of attrition rather than you feeling like you have to attack their attack. And I feel like that is part of the game. And that's, part of the journey is clearing your mind, being comfortable out of position, and then clearing and resetting and starting from scratch, and then having a new approach. And that's just pattern recognition. Like those three things didn't work. Let's try these two things. And then you'll lean into more positive outcomes. Like I keep continuing on because that means different things for every person, positive outcomes, whether that's a successful half guard entry or a big throw to their back or a back take. Those things like lend themselves to different strengths and different attributes of different athletes. So that's usually how I start things. Like yesterday, I was working with Jocko Willemich's daughters, and I hadn't worked with one of his daughters. And I just watched her drill for 5 minutes rather than let's do these 10 things. It's like, let's see who you are as a human on your feet. And it leads itself to me understanding more about them and maybe seeing some things they do well and maybe some holes they could fill in, and then structure some drills, some patterns, some movements, some moves that might lend themselves to you having more successful outcomes rather than me just imploring a game plan that works well for me. So it's, I took some time separating myself from an athlete and a coach, where a lot of people don't. They just go right from one to the other at about a 4-year gap, 5-year gap, where I was a high level judoka and wrestler. And then I went and got away from all grappling disciplines and sports, kind of like filled in the holes of my life because I had a lot to be desired there. I spent so much time and energy traveling the world, competing, training, that I still had to finish college. I had to kind of figure myself out in capitalism, and I got away from it all. And it gave me kind of a clear sense of the bigger picture rather than this is what I do, this is how I would do it, so you should do it that way. Where, I've had a myriad of injuries and I've had to change my identity on the mat numerous times based on, ailing body. So I kind of was a well-rounded athlete at different parts of my life, did different moves and movements that won me matches. So I feel like I had some perspective and depth, and I could associate people's lack of skill or skill in certain areas with different movements and moves based on my perception of who they are, whether they're taller, younger, shorter, flexible, or lack thereof. I could kind of start to build in who they could be at the best case scenario. And I feel like that really has helped as far as coaching and a perspective of just like, I didn't go right in from being a high level athlete to being a coach. And I think a lot of people do that because that's just the trajectory of all grappling disciplines, where you have to make money after you're done competing. And I kind of had my hand outside of the sports, and I filled in some holes as far as building skills in other areas. And I brought my full sense of self back into these spaces, and I learned a lot. I came into jiu-jitsu late. I was 36 when I started my journey, as far as like, okay, I'm going to start as a white belt. I've done plenty of open mats as a, jiu-jitsu and judo high-level competitor, but I really hadn't started from scratch and played guard in a way where it's like, man, I have a sense of urgency never to be here from disciplines that teach that. So I was able to kind of like free myself of the burden of always winning, always being on top, always getting the sub, getting the takedown, getting the throw, in a way where I could let things come to me. And I applied that into my takedown game a lot more, where I feel like if I had that when I was younger, it would have helped me out immensely. I would have been able to set more traps, been able to understand the depths of how my boundaries could have increased from having to like bail on things to like, let's stay here and see where this ends up. And I could like maybe counter later within a space rather than be ahead. And I think who's first a lot of times does win at high levels. But a lot of times, if you're tricky and you have a confidence in yourself where you can apply a certain subset of takedowns, you could wait. You could be, let them come to you and figure it out within that exchange and scramble, or that pickup where they're picking you up and you're off balance and then you use that against them. I think a lot of those attributes from just being out of position help a lot.
Justin, there's something you said there I want to zoom in on. I'm going to zoom in on it selfishly as well, because it really does speak to me in my situation I'm in right now. You talked about re-identifying yourself on the mats and having to work around injuries and kind of remap your game a little bit. I'm currently sidelined. Unfortunately, I've got the doctor wants me off the mats for about 6 months while I go through some things to work on my spine and my neck. And then I've also got a condition in my foot called hallux rigidus, where it's the big joint in my toe doesn't bend back past 90 degrees anymore. So it's really affected me both on my feet and also with my neck. Now I'm having to reevaluate how I play on the ground. I would love to pick your brain on this a little bit, if you don't mind. Did you find that with your injuries that you've had to work around, has it been a pretty dramatic change in your game that you've had when you talk about reevaluating and redesigning your game? Has it been pretty significant?
Definitely. Man, I don't even know where to start as far as my injuries personally, or just how I would identify how I've shifted my game to adapt to my body. So when I was doing judo and wrestling, I suffered from, a lot of neck injuries and back injuries and knee injuries. Those are like the main ones, other than, shoulder, rotator cuff, AC separations, ankle injuries. But my right knee specifically and my neck are the two, the ones that I've had to deal with the most over, the 25 years that those injuries have been around. So I've had, I don't know, about 18 knee surgeries. I've had 6 ACL reconstructions. I don't have ACLs or PCLs. I don't have cartilage in my right knee. I've gotten my right knee completely rebuilt with bone grafts and bone marrow, because there's just no cartilage, and arthritis is so bad from the lack of ligaments, because it's like just wacky wavy inflatable tube leg a little bit. I had a big bone growth, like cauliflower knee in my right knee over the last 10 years that basically stabilized my knee, but I couldn't straighten it, even come close to straightening it, or even come close to bending it all the way. So that really does hamper how my knee functions within the space. And that's my support knee. My right leg is my support leg as a lefty. So I lead with my left foot. My right leg holds all of my weight when I attack with either foot sweeps or osotogari, uchimata, uchigari, kochigari. If they shoot in on my leg, my right leg is my support system. So without the foundation to be able to have any kind of, stability, I've had to really adjust my game. And I got that big growth taken out maybe 2 years ago. And it was really loose. I mean, that thing held my knee together. I remember the day before I had that surgery, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to train as hard as possible today, because this could be it. I did over at Legion. I trained hard with Keenan, Miha, Max, all the killers that are on the mat at that spot, PJ, everyone. Because I'm like, this could be it. I'm just going to go at it, and and I'll be a full-time coach and use my mentorship and my brain as my outlet of knowledge that I've accumulated throughout my life, rather than being able to show everything and show it in a live manner. So, I've gotten, my neck from a few specific moments. I have, like 3 herniations in my neck where I can't turn my head, or I can't go back in a certain way, or I get, numbness and a stinger right away. So, I really can't shoot through anyone. I don't shoot. Every shot I do to a leg is a pass of an elbow to a leg rather than through them. I'm never hitting my head on someone where it could cause that kind of traumatic numbness and tingling and headache that ensues immediately. So my right knee and my neck have been things that I've had to work around for decades. So I've utilized a lot of different techniques where I don't have to make those contact points. I don't fight for head position. I don't gnaw my way in to winning head position ever. I'll give up head position every time to find easier outlets and more efficient modalities for takedowns. So it kind of spits in the face of wrestling meta, where I concede position a lot because I feel like people give that up a lot easier. So I've had to formulate takedowns that derive from them being overconfident. So, yeah, my body has been really put through the ringer, and I'm really looking forward to. I'm leaving on Sunday to go to Origins, which is a stem cell clinic in Panama, where I'm doing a full gamut of an array of stem cell injections that are embryonic, where I'm going to do intravenous and joint shots, where I'm going to do 1 week down there and have, from what I've heard, a new lease on life. I mean, the things that I haven't been able to do that, give me headaches or give me stingers or make me have to be off my feet for 24 to 48 hours because my leg is so swollen from just going at it. I'm really hopeful. And I think it's going to be something that I can look back on, and it's going to give me, an extra 4 or 5 years without having to get my knee replaced or my neck having to not get fusions. So that's where I'm kind of at, where I still go at it. And I have to tell myself every time I get on the mat that I'm not going to be a training partner for someone, or I'm not going to go in a half sparring or live sparring way. But that kind of like dog in me always wants to compete or just be there for an athlete that needs to compete soon. So it's really been like an internal struggle I've had to deal with. So, that's how I've kind of molded myself in this latter portion of my teaching and coaching stanza of where I'm at now. But the moves I've chosen are much more efficient now. If I know a move that has 7 steps where I'm going to be out of position in even one of them possibly in a way that's going to hurt my knee or neck, I opt out. And I'm not saying don't learn those things. It's something that's integral to being well-rounded. It's just something that I did in my 20s that I don't do anymore, or something I did in my teens that I just don't do anymore. So now I have more of a pattern that I stick to. And sometimes I go astray and I pay for it. And you may not be able to see it in what I post in my content on YouTube or Instagram, but I'm in pain. Anytime I hit my head wrong and I'm off to just a quarter angle a little bit, I can't feel my right hand. Then I have a stinger that just presides over the next 24 hours. And I want to play with my kids. I got 2 kids and they're both super active. And I want to lead a life where I give as much back to my kids as possible in a way where I'm present. I'm not just like a zombie because I'm in so much pain, and I've been there plenty. So, back to the stem cells, I'm really looking at this as like something that could shift my whole life force into a way where I could be a little bit more active, but also I'm going to need to put the guardrails on, especially when I have athletes that, are competing. And I've kind of worked my way outside of that sphere of high level athletes. I mean, I'd worked with athletes of the highest nature yesterday, but I'm not going to be their partner. I can't force myself to be put in bad positions for their growth anymore. That's super selfless, and I get it as a coach, but I've really done my best to step backwards from that role. And I've done it for so many athletes. And I've had to grit my teeth and kind of like, keep things internalized from them because I want the best for their, output and how they grow. But that time's over now. And I've had a lot of offers to work with the highest level fighters in the world in disciplines that I have to just send other people like Max Schneider or other athletes to be there for them. And I have to kind of opt out and more, advise and be there for them in a capacity that is from the side, where I'm liking that role. It's just a different role.
I really appreciate you sharing all this. And man, I really do hope that the stem cells bring you back that quality of life you're looking for. Because it's really interesting because when I watch you move, I follow you religiously on Instagram. I think the stuff you post is outstanding. So I'm always keeping an eye on your the tips you're giving out. It doesn't look like a person in pain. I mean, you're really good at, I guess it's just years and years of ingrained movement and you're able to do it. But, Yeah, it sucks hearing that there's so much pain behind a lot of the stuff that you're doing even now. So I hope I've heard nothing but good things about people that have done stem cells. So I hope that works for you.
But strangely enough, the best I feel is when I'm moving, when I'm out there doing what I do in like a state of mind where, it's not even adrenaline. It's just, I feel loose and I'm doing what I do best and I could kind of no mind it. Uh, I feel good. I feel like I could probably compete at the highest levels for one match. Um, but doing it over and over in a way where I have to put in a camp or I have to do 6 matches in a competition, that's impossible. But I'm able to kind of put together and string together a couple rounds where I feel well. And it does show that, but it's how I feel right after or the 10 hours later or trying to get a good night's sleep. It's difficult. So I'm really, looking forward to this next step where I'm looking at coaching the coaches and being able to work with instructors in a way where I create a network, an affiliate program of like-minded instructors that can add takedowns into their already established curriculum where it's safe, it's applicable, and it's in a way that retains students rather than, these traumatic movements and takedowns of falling weight lead to injuries. So learning how to fall properly, learning how to concede properly, learning how to maybe cut out moves that lead to injuries, self-censoring a little bit, understanding the full spectrum of how positive outcomes come from the ground up. So teaching instructors, especially in jiu-jitsu, both no-gi and gi, is where my future is. I have a JFLO dojo affiliate network I've started. I have mastermind seminars once and twice a year here in San Diego where I put out the bat signal and I invite gym owners and instructors to come and take courses to be certified in this. And I really want to proliferate this ideology to be able to create more of a well-rounded sport within jiu-jitsu. And I think, I'm not harping on jiu-jitsu. There's plenty of high-level judo and wrestlers that are in jiu-jitsu, but the way it's taught sometimes doesn't include takedowns other than a random move. Nothing surrounding the move, where it doesn't have enough time and energy dictated to it. So whether it's one takedown class a night or it's 20 minutes for every class that's dedicated to the safety and the application of takedowns in a way where it's mutual growth between partners, where both people are learning, the person getting taken down, the person employing those takedowns. And it leads to a place where, I could really leave my mark in a way where it's not just my legacy, it's just contributing to the well-roundedness of a sport.
What a valuable resource that is, Justin. Because I know countless school owners who have told me personally, like, man, listen, like a lot of my students will come to me wanting to learn more takedowns, and I never wrestled, and I never did judo. I know some of the the takedowns that we learn in jiu-jitsu, and any decent jiu-jitsu school have a set of takedowns that we use. He says, but if someone wants something further than that, I feel irresponsible trying to show them something that I'm not super savvy on myself. So I usually just encourage them to join the local wrestling room on weekends or, explore some private classes in judo. If they had someone like yourself that was overseeing a program, if had an affiliation with you, I mean, that's a really valuable service. So that's a super cool idea, especially at this stage that you're at now in your coaching career. I think that's a great idea, man.
If you feel like you're getting value out of these videos, make sure to like and subscribe. And now back to the video.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I just wanted to make sure every piece was in place for this. I have a whole back end. I have a great developer, a great video editor. I have instructionals for instructors. I have my mastermind summit twice a year, being able to facilitate that growth, having, Zoom calls with instructors, being able to be more of a consultant as well as perform seminars and instructor courses is where I think most of my identity is going to lie moving forward. So I really do enjoy scrapping, but I feel like to grow what I've done in a way where it leads to a community of like-minded instructors and gym owners that, really do want to see that growth and become more well-rounded, this is my future.
Well, yeah, I think that, again, a great idea, a great service. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would have a lot of benefit from it, because they, that knowledge isn't readily available in every single academy. In fact, a lot of them don't have it. So that's super cool. And Justin, I appreciate you also. I mean, there's something you said earlier. You were talking about things you do for your own neck. I actually wrote these down: not grinding in for head position with your neck, not blasting in with your head forward. You said you like to shoot in and drop. Your shots are basically done around angles. They're done around elbows and finding openings rather than blasting straight into somebody. These are all things that I think are going to help me, man, because that's my big concern is that when I come back, once I get the clear from the doctor to come back, my fear is that I'm going to do the wrong thing and then be right back in the same position again. So is in any other advice you could offer me, man, as far as keeping my neck safe, especially when fighting from the feet? Because where I train, we usually start from the feet.
Definitely look for wrist control, be able to fight wrists and re-wrists, give up wrist control to get wrist control. Look for elbow passes. If they're hanging on your neck, be able to clear that. There's a bunch of ways to do that. So rather than like do it back to them and now you're just squeezing each other's heads, be able to find your angles. I think learning how to function with an overhook is important rather than burrowing your way in for underhooks. It's okay to be on the outside over if you're comfortable enough to lift and rotate using that tie-up. 2-on-1s are great options to be able to find angles. It's just how you get to those. Sometimes, you don't want to let them on your neck and then find your 2-on-1. It's how you go out and get those positions. Being able to give up single legs sometimes rather than like sprawl and down block everything. Sometimes you can bypass a lot of the hand fighting. It just takes its time. And I think a lot of gameplay and figuring out what games you could create around those outcomes of how you could break balance or be comfortable on your feet without there being high impact, which gets people more comfortable on their feet. So falling second rather than falling first in a way where you understand how that happens, where your weight is distributed, how you could compartmentalize your body rather than having rigor mortis body and every muscle is flexed. You kind of understand that if they push a shoulder, just that shoulder moves. If they grab and pull your arm, just that arm moves. You're not connected everywhere based on like your rigidity and nerves, because that happens a lot. Just flexion based on you holding your breath and being stiff and nervous, because the outcome could be you getting injured. And a lot of times what helps in that is knowing how to fall. If you know how to fall, there's nothing to be feared. You'll be okay. It's knowing how to like take that impact so you can keep the exchange going, whether you lost to the takedown and you still have a recourse rather than, I just dislocated my shoulder because I landed on my elbow, or I reached out and put my hand behind me. Now I hyperextended my elbow, or I landed on my head rather than tucking my chin. Those things are the foundation, what all of it's built on. Knowing how to roll through things rather than like, I fell square on my back because I want to be in guard and I held on to them. Now we headbutted each other because I held on to the person taking me down. And that just is the learning curve. And that's the basic foundation of what I'm trying to implore within, the sport of jiu-jitsu, which is part of judo and part of wrestling.
Gets me in the right mood, ready to roll, ready to teach, motivated, loose feeling. My aches and pains seem to dissipate over the course of the next 20 or 30 minutes. So I enjoy the ride.
That's great, man. Yeah, Justin, I really do appreciate the advice and insight. Justin, I know you got to run pretty soon. One more selfish question for you before I let you go.
Sure.
So I talked earlier about a condition I have in my foot where I can't bend my toes back much more than about 45 degrees. Unfortunately, that has removed my ability to drop levels and shoot in for singles and doubles and things like that. What advice would you give me in being in that situation? What I've been working on currently is trying to build more a Russian tie system because it allows me to stay upright. I've worked on focusing more towards arm drags and kind of Greco style stuff. But from a judo perspective, what are some good things that I could be doing that don't require me to flex my toe back and drop levels the way I would in wrestling.
Is it your left toe or right?
It's both of them, but the right is much worse than the left. I just got an acid injection in my joint, so it's helped a little bit, but it's only supposed to last for about 6 months before
Can you curl your foot forward and it's just back that hurts?
Yes, okay. Forward's no problem. Yeah.
So you could cup your foot. So I would say foot sweeps would be.
I was going to say I suck at foot sweeps. I want to learn them. I wish I was better at them. But you think foot sweeps would be the way to go, huh?
I mean, a shameless plug. Get a free month of my website, and that goes for everyone out there. Use what's the code? JFLO seminar. I give that out to just every time I do a seminar. Use that as the coupon code, and I would go with Awesome Ashiwaza. It breaks things down from by yourself, how the mechanics work, to with a partner, and then so on and so forth through a chronological order. I think that might pay dividends. Just being able to use your foot as like a putter rather than like a slap shot, or rather than hooking and tripping and falling with them, just like a 3-inch tap. That's how most of foot sweeps work. It's not a big roundhouse kick or a Muay Thai leg kick. It's just a very subtle movement. And once you understand your balance in that position, using your foot ever so slightly, you're going to break their balance, or better yet, get them down to a knee and spin behind them, or best case scenario, throw them to their back. So you have 3 positive outcomes based on touching their foot with a safe tie-up, with a 2-on-1, an underhook, an overhook. You have those options. So you don't have to be desperate. It's just something you could kind of spam safely, where it leads to a lot of options that emanate from that. So you could chain in other moves, whether it's a shot, whether it's a front headlock, whether it's a go behind, whether it's a pinning combination. It kind of dials you in for, success.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll tell you what, Justin, I will give you my word. I'm going to focus really hard on foot sweeps. Finally, it's something that, look, anytime someone lands a foot sweep, it's just like, it's art in motion. It's beautiful when it happens. Anytime I've tried, I fail horrifically. I'm usually the one that gets taken down. But I promise I will watch your course.
There is a learning curve. It's not going to happen like that. So.
No, of course. I give you my word. I'm going to watch your course, and I'm going to give it a try, and I'll report back to you for sure. Awesome. Justin, I appreciate your time. I know you have an appointment, so I'm going to let you go here. Real quick, what are some major goals you have for the rest of the year?
So an exciting one. Again, I'm going to be back at CJI as a judge. A little different format this year with the quintet style team approach, but I'm really looking forward to it. I do like the all that goes into competition, the stress, the athletes putting in their all, being able to be part of the spectacle aspect of it as well. It's just something that's, it's the payoff almost. And I had to have like a job, so I'm going to be dialed in. That is one thing. The mastermind summit I have in October, I'll have coming up, where I teach teachers how to teach this approach for takedowns that seamlessly integrate into a curriculum that the gym already has. That's something I'm working on tirelessly. My affiliate dojo network, where I have a group of like-minded instructors that are part of this group, the JFLO Dojo Network. So I want to grow that out in a way where takedowns and this ideology of safe takedowns is spread throughout gyms across the world, hopefully. I have a number of seminars across the globe. I'll be in Portugal in September. I'll be in Manchester, UK in September. I'll be in Denver in August. I'll be in, that's hard offhand. Those are the international ones, at least. I'll be in Australia in February. I have, pretty full gamut of seminars spread out throughout the year. And I'm always adding content to my YouTube channel, which is JFLO Judo. I have my online repository of instructionals broken up by series on jfloacademy.com. I'm selling knee pads now from a lifelong of injuries, where I now have designed my own knee pad, where you can find that on my website shop, as well as rash guards, t-shirts, and other products. So yeah, I have a lot going on. I'm on the mat every day teaching privates as well as shooting content. So if you check out my Instagram at JFLO Judo, my YouTube at JFLO Judo, my TikTok at JFLO Judo, you could check me out there.
If you guys aren't following him, you're missing out on a lot of really good content. If you follow him on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell icon to get notified when he adds new videos, because he adds content all the time. Also, guys, check out his website, jfloacademy.com. That's where he's going to have information about his courses, his seminars, and everything else he's got going on. If you guys are ever traveling through San Diego, drop into Legion Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, that's one of the top places in the world to train, and he's there all the time giving classes. If you can't make it to San Diego, though, you can learn from him anywhere in the world here at bjjfanatics.com as well. One of our best-selling instructionals is his Safe Sacrifice Throws for BJJ instructional, which is a staple in my personal library. It's helped me a ton. A lot of people worry about getting injured with doing takedowns in jiu-jitsu. That's one of the barriers that some people sometimes have a hard time crossing over and learning takedowns because they're afraid they're going to get hurt. This whole instructional specifically talks about safe ways to do sacrifice throws, which are really low risk and really effective. So check that out at bjjfanatics.com. And that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the BJJ Fanatics podcast.